10,000 years in a lightless tomb with the entity that destroyed your empire, and it's the only voice you've been hearing that entire time? Yeah, I'd be furious too. This week we take a look at the Butcher of the Sands, Renekton. Welcome to Runeterra Tourist. My name is Patrick. I don't know anything about these people yet, so let's learn about them together. So we're obviously talking about Renekton today, and there's a funny coincidence where the tomb in which he gets out of in 989 AN is also the same year that Mbessa, who we talked about last week, dies at the Hex Gate. So same calendar year, kind of coincidence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We've got some new subscribers, so welcome and thank you for subscribing. And if you haven't yet, do that, the whole like and subscribe thing. And if you're watching on mobile, give it a hype. It helps spread the word of this channel and really helps it grow. I'm appreciative of all your efforts. Thank you so much, everybody. So I've got to confess that it took me a little bit to work up towards this episode because I would see the art of Renekton and think this was just some goofy crocodile, like a crocodile man with this fan axe thing. What is that about? He is very clearly inspired by the Egyptian god Sobek, specifically based off of their military prowess and this animal aggression that they both share in their lore. Unsurprisingly, in Riftbound, Renekton is a Fury and Body legend released in Vendetta, and in League, Renekton's entire identity is based off of building up and spending Fury, this extra resource that's unique to him, separate from mana. And when I received my pre-rift kit with Renekton in it, I got wrecked. I got Renekton. Wrecked. I'll work on that one, sorry. But it made me question all of my life choices up to that point. So how did Riot translate all of this into his playstyle in Riftbound? Well, let's get to the lore first and see how the theme emerged. Renekton was born to fight. As a child, he would constantly pick fights with children much older than himself, usually out of pride, because he just could never let an insult pass, and he would never back down. He has some real Marty McFly energy. His older brother Nasus was completely opposite. He was a scholar who had memorized and critiqued the great works of Shuriman history and philosophy before he was even 10 years old. Nasus leaves for the pretentious Collegium of the Sun, and in the meantime, Renekton's fights get way more serious in his absence. Afraid his brother would end up imprisoned or dead, Nasus gets him involved in the Shuriman army, underaged with the paperwork conveniently overlooked. And the discipline suits him. He becomes renowned not just for his ferocity, but for his honor and bravery. And so Nasus would become a general, and he would say that he planned all of these great battles, but it was Renekton who would win them for him. There's an instance involving the Battle of Zareta where, outnumbered 10-1, Renekton and a small contingent was able to hold a mountain pass to buy time to evacuate the city. And nobody expected him to survive it, let alone win, but he held off just long enough for Nasus to arrive with reinforcements. And so he was made captain by the Emperor himself and named Gatekeeper of Shurima. Renekton becomes a grizzled veteran of middling years and seeking to become greater than the god warriors of his time. But despite this hardened exterior, he always had a soft spot for his brother. So it's no surprise that when he learned that Nasus was dying of this incurable curse, he felt compelled to act. Nasus's greatness is such that it's decreed that he is worthy of ascension, but he is too weak to climb onto the dais himself. So a quick interruption about what Ascension and the Sun Disk are. So the Sun Disk is this colossal disk that hovers above the Shuriman capital. You can kind of see it right there. And it's built by mortals under the guidance of the aspects of Targon, which channels celestial power. This served two functions. It made the desert bloom, and it was the machine that turned worthy mortals into ascended god warriors. So yes, the Ascension is technically Shuriman, but the technology is Targonian. A fun little detail, if you will, the first Sun Disk was built in Naramaza, say that 10 times fast, and for reasons never explained, it failed and was destroyed. But now the one that everybody knows about is the second attempt, so if at first you don't succeed. So Renekton picks up his brother and carries him into the light of the Sun Disk, fully expecting to be obliterated. I mean, he's just a warrior after all, whereas Shurima will need Nasus. But despite his unworthiness, this selfless act actually means he isn't destroyed. And so the brothers are remade, Nasus into this lean, jackal-headed figure, whereas Renekton becomes this crocodile. With these new powers, Renekton continues to lead the Shuriman army to numerous victories for centuries and becoming this unstoppable force. However, he also started to develop a little bit of bloodlust. When the northern coastal city of Nashrame is captured, the crocodile beast goes on a rampage and destroys the Grand Library, just completely annihilating it in their siege of the place. Hearing this, Nasus arrives at the scene and confronts Renekton, causing his bloodlust to dissipate, and under his brother's stern gaze, he feels shame and turns away. Around the same time, the young Emperor Azir is to be ascended, and it goes catastrophically wrong. His Magus Xerath sabotages the event. This should be a future video. Keep that in mind. Yeah, I'll do that later. Both Nasus and Renekton are more than a day's journey out, but they rush to the capital anyway as best they can, and they arrive to see a ruined city and the sun disk drained of all of its power. And at the center of it, Xerath, now this being of malevolent energy. Renekton wrestles Xerath into the tomb of the emperors and orders his brother to seal them both into the sarcophagus, realizing that you can't stop him, you can only hope to contain him, and Nasus reluctantly does as he's ordered. Xerath and Renekton continue fighting in the darkness for uncounted centuries while Shurima turns to dust. And Xerath slowly whispers poison into Renekton's psyche, saying how Nasus was jealous of him and leapt at the chance to get rid of him so that he could have immortality all to himself. Not for nothing, Nasus did get him into the army by pulling some strings, and Nasus did plan all of the battles that Renekton won. And so Renekton spends his entire life basically being the instrument to his brother's intelligence. So when you've got this voice whispering into you for these dark days that your brother used you for hundreds of centuries, basically kind of worms its way into your reasoning. Piece by piece, his sanity cracks, and Xerath is placing a wedge inside those cracks, and over time, Renekton is now convinced that his brother had taken pleasure in locking him into this tomb. In 989 AN, Sivir, a treasure hunter hired by Cassiopeia, inadvertently releases Renekton and Xerath from their imprisonment in a moment when Cassiopeia betrays her by trying to seek immortality herself. And Renekton thunders into the desert that he doesn't recognize anymore, sniffing for his brother's scent. In his short story With Teeth, it talks about how in his search for Nasus, he comes across the Sand Thrashers for the first time, and instead of answering his question, their leader, Sirtha, challenges him to a duel and gets handedly wrecked, completely destroyed, having his body thrown into the jaws of a predator nearby. And then Renekton continues on his search as if that never happened. But in a Legends of Runeterra story involving a sand runner sent by Azir to retrieve this medallion from the Sand Thrasher's cavern, it leads to him encountering Renekton, and then the pair finds Nasus in the Chamber of Renewal, where Renekton fights his brother to an unresolved ending, oddly enough. After all of this, there are some people, Nasus among them, who believe that a portion of Renekton's humanity got removed upon his transformation, and so he got crueler, and there are whispers of these battlefield atrocities. It's interesting to see how Riot decided to update Renekton's bio in December of 2021 after all of this time of simply saying that he was consumed by madness and being little more than rage-fueled beast who seeks to kill his brother, who he believes is responsible for his current state of madness, and then not explaining anything more than that. Or tweaking it just slightly to say that he got entombed beneath the sands after this unexplained fall of the Empire, and that he was driven insane during his captivity, but still seeking to kill his brother, whom he blamed for some reason. So how did the Riftbound cards do in explaining all of that? In League of Legends, it's all about Reign of Anger, and it's this passive that grants him attacks and abilities to generate Fury, that additional resource I spoke of, and he generates bonus Fury if his health is below the half. And at 50 Fury, his abilities are empowered to perform this additional effect. Slice and Dice allows him to dash a fixed distance, dealing damage to any enemies that he passes through, and Ruthless Predator empowers his next attack and stuns the enemy. And the ultimate Dominus increases his size as he gains bonus health and does damage at a greater attack range, generating even more Fury in the process. Now in Legends of Runeterra, his champion unit has Overwhelm, which is where if he deals damage in excess of the blocker's health, he deals the excess damage to the Nexus. And he has this ability where he challenges the enemy, aka forcing them to block. When that happens, he gets an additional 2 power and +1 health that round. He has the spells Ruthless Predator, that increases a unit's power while making an enemy vulnerable, while creating a Renekton in your deck, and Dominus Destruction, different name, which causes a unit to deal 2 damage to the Nexus. Interesting directions for possible Renekton builds in Riftbound. So what did Riot choose to do? Starting with the legend, Renekton Butcher of the Sands, he's in the Fury and Body domains, and he has the ability at reaction speed, pay 2 power and exhaust the card to add 2 energy. Spend this energy only to play units or activated abilities of units. Now, my table experience is that I ran out of runes fast, and that's likely a pilot error, I will confess that, but the community seems to be fixated on this idea of having this turn 1 4-drop ability leaning all the way into the aggro side of things, but I don't really think that's the way to use this ability. Running out of runes that early doesn't feel like a good idea for your tempo, and because it's reaction speed, I feel like you want to wait to use this at the right moment for this explosive turn, something where, let's say you have a Rengar that you can spring onto the board at a moment's notice. The thing is, this isn't really ramp. You're kind of converting power into energy at a restricted rate. So you're trading a resource that you could use for spells or gears, and you're turning it into a resource that is only used for bodies and abilities. But because it costs power, there is actually an interesting note, is that none of the other cards I'm going to talk about in his kit involve spending power. Not Dominus, Rage Fueled, Brute, all of those things. Yeah, no power to cost. I mean, mercifully, his package doesn't involve spending power like that, but how effective are the other cards? Well, his signature spell Dominus costs 4 energy and has the ability Action. This turn, double a unit's might and give it the ability to spend 2 power to ready me. Named after his ultimate where he transforms and gets enormous, doubling the might is basically that transformation. This is very straightforward, definitely a flavor hit. I find it funny that his signature spell is Latin amidst this Egyptian and Southwest Asian themed setting. You've got Cole the Meek and Ruthless Predator, Slice and Dice, and then Dominus. The ready ability costs 2 power and the legend costs 2 power to give you 2 energy to spend on units and unit abilities, so they're drawing from the same runes. It feels like a weird mixture of things. Doubling the might in a Fury body build can get really silly fast. I mean, this kind of reminds me of that whole like Vi Destructive days where you'd be able to do double conquers, granted with purple helping her out, but you know, that fell out of fashion. I'm wondering if this ability would be good still, or come back around, being able to ready a unit seems important. However, this feels pretty expensive to pull off, and burning 2 of the runes that you spent to play this kind of feels like a trap in a very power-hungry deck. The rare champion unit out of Fury is Renekton Rage Fuel, costs 6 energy for a 6 might unit, and has the ability Accelerate, where you pay 1 energy and 1 Fury power as an additional cost to have me enter ready. And when I attack, if you control 4 or fewer runes, deal 2 to all enemy units here. It's kind of expensive despite the fact that it doesn't cost any power, and it's currently the one seeing the most champ zone play from the few people playing Renekton right now. But the whole flavor of if you control 4 or fewer runes feels like their version of Reign of Anger, the idea of being below half health, although health in this game is points technically, so I'm surprised they didn't do something like they did with Poppy, where if your opponent is closer to 3 points or something like that. Except dealing 2 damage to all enemy units is fine, I guess. I mean, you'll need spells to make that happen to be more impactful, which costs energy from runes that you're burning for legend ability and other items, and you only have 4 or fewer to work with, so I guess Falling Star would be the most efficient way. It's too thinky. It's too thinky for me. To be fair though, it is thematically close to what I would expect from Renekton, so I guess there's that. Finally, the epic champion out of the body domain is Renekton Brute, a 5 energy cost 4 might unit with the abilities spend 1 energy to give me +1 might this turn, and when my might becomes 10 or more, empower me. And when he's empowered, he has the ability I have deflect and ganking. Getting from 4 might to 10 costs 6 energy on top of the 5 to cast it. Sure, there are spells and such to perhaps make this cheaper to get this done, but where are you getting the runes for this since you're spending them all? And all of this for something that's only lasting 1 turn. So how does Renekton stack up overall? My first impression of the backstory was that it's pretty thin. You've got the old Riot vagueness, slightly revised with a setting that's basically Egypt with the serial numbers filed off. I mean, and compared to last week where you had Ambessa, who has a novel, this prominent role in a series, versus Renekton's 3 pages and nothing else. But going back through it, I can see that the bones are better than I was initially giving it credit for. The idea that he gets ascension, even though he was not necessarily worthy, but the gods seem to deem him anyway because of his act. The sacrificing himself for Nasus twice effectively with varying results. And, you know, the fact that there's the Zareth lies that were built on partial truth. The fact that Nasus did seal him in there, but that was, you know, by his orders, but Nasus also did walk free for millennia. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities here for exploration of this more than now he's chasing his brother down forever. I will say though, it is nice that they did something more than just saying Renekton went crazy and the end. As for the cards and deck building, my gut initially thought that this was rewarding you in some sense, but really it's asking a lot of you. You have to do a lot to reap the benefits of the legend ability. It gives you energy, sure, but what it actually demands is a deck that's built basically off of no power costs, which is really hard for Fury and Body to do. But sure, you're able to use its ability to put out units for cheaper, I guess, and activating abilities, but all of that seems to be more of a deck building tax than anything compared to other Fury and Body decks. I guess the saving grace is that it asks you to spend down to nothing, and there were cards in this set that reward you for doing such a thing, and my playstyle being what it is, I have no problem spending runes. But Fury and Body are 2 of the more aggressive domains in the game, and so this ability seems to lean right into that, being able to rush these oversized units onto battlefields to conquer them and then making it miserable for opponents to try to get you off of those battlefields. If the deck gets behind, its strategy is basically don't get behind. But I guess the longer answer is you're going to try to use the power to then convert it into bigger bodies to recontest the battlefields, utilizing some that have accelerates, and then trying to clear the board of like all of the enemy units using Falling Star and friends. It's kind of funny because in League of Legends he's tremendous in the early game and falls off significantly once the damage scaling isn't as effective, and that feels like that's the exact opposite of how it works here. You don't want to burn his ability early because it'll set you back so much, and so you want to actually wait and utilize those for explosive turns later in the match. So I expect this deck to probably run 6 seals just to pay for everything. Flavor-wise, I feel like they did okay with Renekton. You know, he is a very angry crocodile god warrior, so being Fury and Body makes a lot of sense, and especially with all of the might increasing abilities that he has. At least it's not a generic aggro deck with a crocodile pasted on it, so there is that. Red Orange has always had a difficult time in competitive play, with the couple of exceptions like Sam Sherman getting to the finals with Rengar, Prismaticism apparently winning in Ottawa with Rengar as well. You have Volley Bear occasionally making the top 8, albeit with Aurora builds mostly. Well, this doesn't feel like the kind of deck that I would play, even though I love spending runes haphazardly. I feel like this deck rewards you for being patient and taking calculated risks and spending the power and energy to maximize the effectiveness, which is not typical for most aggro builds. So how do you think Riot did with Renekton? And for the Renekton mains, do you feel like the Fury and Body versions here in his deck really encapsulates what he's about, or did they have this generic, chaotically constructed aggro deck put with his face on it? Let me know in the comments below. So that's one side of the coin, and we'll get to the other when we discuss Nasus, but I think next week we're going to take a quick trip back to Ionia just for a second, so subscribe if that sounds like your sort of a thing, and until next time, thanks for watching.